Quotations, Aldous Huxley. Perhaps it's good for one to suffer. Can an artist do anything if he's happy? Would he ever want to do anything? What is art, after all, but a protest against the horrible inclemency of life? At least 2/3 of our miseries spring from human stupidity, human malice, and those great motivators and justifiers of malice and stupidity, the organic consciousness is a very useful thing, and on most occasions indispensable. But it is by no means the only form of consciousness, nor in all circumstances the best. Insofar as he transcends his ordinary self and his ordinary mode of awareness, the mystic is able to enlarge his vision, to look more deeply into the unfathomable miracle of existence. The mystical experience is doubly valuable. It is valuable because it gives you experience of understanding himself and the world, and being able to listen and read things. It's pronounced that would be vital. The honorable example of the human voice has been silenced so early in their lives that they do not even struggle or suffer to develop symptoms as the neurotic does. They are normal, not in what we may call the absolute sense of the word. They are normal only in relation to a profoundly abnormal society. Their perfect adjustment to that abnormal society is a measure of their mental sickness. These millions of abnormally normal people living without fuss in a society to which, if they were fully human beings, they ought not to be adjusted. The passion for power is one of the most moving passions which exist in man. And, after all democracies are based on the proposition that power is very dangerous. And that it's extremely important not to let any one man or any small group have too much power for too long. After all, what are the British and American constitutions except devices for limiting power? And all of these new devices, television, radio, etc., are extremely efficient instruments for the imposition of power by small groups over larger masses. When we see a rose, we immediately say rose. We do not say, I see a roundish mass of delicately shaded pinks and reds. We immediately pass from the actual experience to the concept. We cannot help living to a very large extent in terms of concepts. We have to do so, because immediate experience is so chaotic and so immensely rich that in mere self-preservation we have to use the machinery of language to sort out what is of utility for us, what in any given context is of importance, and at the same time try to understand, because it is only in terms of language that we can understand what is happening. We make generalizations, and we go into higher and higher degrees of abstraction, which permit us to comprehend what we are up to, which we certainly would not do if we didn't have language. And in this way, language is an immense boon, which we could not possibly ever do without. Man who comes back through the door of the wall will never be quite the same as the man who went out. He will be wiser but less sure, happier but less self-satisfied, humbler in acknowledging his ignorance, and better equipped to understand the relationship of words to things, of systematic reasoning to the unfathomable mystery which it tries forever vainly to comprehend. In general, we think that the pointing finger, the word, is the thing we point at. In reality, words are simply the signs of things. But many people treat things as though they were the signs and illustrations of words. When they see a thing, They immediately think of it as just being an illustration of a verbal category, which is absolutely fatal, because it is not the case. And yet, we cannot do without words. The whole of life, after all, is a process of walking on a tightrope. If you do not fall one way, you fall the other, and each is equally bad. We cannot do without language, and yet, if we take language too seriously, we are in an extremely bad way. We somehow have to keep going on this knife edge. Every action of life is a knife edge, by the way, being aware of the dangers and doing our best to keep out of them. Ours is an industrialized civilization in which no society can prosper unless it possesses an elite of highly trained scientists and a considerable army of engineers and technicians. The possession and wide dissemination of a great deal of correct, specialized knowledge has become a primary condition of national survival. In the United States, during the last 20 or 30 years, this fact seems to have been forgotten. Professional educationists have taken John Dewey's theories of learning through doing and of education as life adjustment and have applied them in such a way in many American schools that there is now doing without learning, along with courses in adjustment to everything except the basic 20th century fact that we live in a world where ignorance of science and its methods is the surest, shortest road to national disaster. During the last half-century, every other nation has made great efforts to impart more knowledge to more young people. In the United States, professional educationists have chosen the opposite path. We love ourselves to the point of idolatry, but we also intensely dislike ourselves. We find ourselves unfetterably boring. Correlated to this distaste of the worship of self, there is in all of us a desire, sometimes latent, sometimes conscious and passionately expressed, to escape from the prison of our individuality, an urge to self-transcendence. It is to this urge that we owe mystical theology, spiritual exercises, and yoga. To this, too, that we owe alcoholism and even drug addiction. I was sitting on the seashore, half listening to a friend arguing violently about something which merely bored me. Unconsciously to myself, I looked at a film of sand I had picked upon my hand, when I suddenly saw the exquisite beauty of every little grain of it. Instead of being dull, I saw that each particle was made up of a perfect geometrical pattern with sharp angles, from each of which formed a brilliant shaft of light, while each tiny crystal shone like a rainbow. The rays crossed and recrossed, making exquisite patterns of such beauty that they left me breathless. Then, suddenly, my consciousness was lighted up from within, and I saw in such a vivid way how the whole universe was made up of particles of material which, no matter how dull and lifeless they may seem, was nevertheless filled with this intense and vital beauty. For a second or two, the whole world appeared as a blaze of glory. When it died down, it left me with something I have never forgotten, and which constantly reminds me of the beauty locked up in every minute speck of material around us. Modern pharmacology has given us a host of new synthetic, but in the field of the naturally occurring mind changers, it has made no radical discoveries. All of the botanical sedatives, stimulants, vision revealers, happiness promoters, and cosmic consciousness arousers were found out thousands of years ago, before even the dawn of history. In In many societies at many levels of civilization, attempts have been made to fuse drug intoxication with God intoxication. In ancient Greece, for example, ethyl alcohol had its place in the established religion. Dionysus, or Bacchus, as he was often called, was a true divinity. His worshippers addressed him such. They telescoped fermentated grape juice and the supernatural into a single experience. Unfortunately, they also received harm. The blissful experience of self-transcendence which alcohol makes possible must be paid for, and the price is exorbitantly high. If I wish to raise my hand, well, I raise it. But who raises it? Who is the I who raises my hand? Certainly, not exclusively the I who is standing here talking. The I who signs the checks and has a history behind him, because I do not have the faintest idea how my hand was raised. All I know is that I expressed a wish for my hand to be raised, whereupon something within myself was set to work, pulled the switches of the most elaborate nervous system, and made 30 or 40 muscles, some of which contract, and some of which relax at the same instant, function in perfect accord, so as to produce this extremely simple gesture. And of course, when we ask ourselves, how does my heart beat? How do we breathe? How do I, in fact, digest my food? We do not have the faintest idea. We, as personalities, as what we like to think of ourselves as being, are in fact only a small part of an immense manifestation of activity, physical and mental, of which we are simply not aware. We have some control over this, inasmuch as some actions being voluntary, we can say, I want this to happen, and somebody else does the work for us. But meanwhile, many actions go on without our having even the slightest consciousness of them. And these vegetative actions can be grossly interfered with by our undesirable thoughts, fears, greeds, angers, and so on. The question then arises, how are we related to this? Why is it that we think of ourselves as only this minute part of a totality far larger than we are? A totality which, according to many philosophers, may actually coexist with the totality of activity of the universe itself. Obviously, we have to get out of the way of the traffic on Hollywood Boulevard. It is no good being aware of everything that is going on in the universe. We have to be aware of the approaching bus. And this is what the brain does for us. It narrows the field down so that we can go through life without getting into serious trouble. But we can and ought to open ourselves up and become what in fact we have always been from the beginning, that is to say, much more widely knowing than we normally think we are. We should realize our identity with what James called cosmic consciousness, and what in the East is called Atman Brahman. The end of life in all great religious traditions is the realization that the finite manifests the infinite in its totality. This, of course, is a complete paradox when it is stated in words. Nevertheless, it is one of the facts of our experience. The dictatorships of tomorrow will deprive men of freedom, but will give them in exchange a happiness nonetheless real as a subjective experience, or being chemically induced. The pursuit of happiness is one of the traditional rights of man. Unfortunately, the achievement of happiness may turn out to be incompatible with another man's rights, namely liberty. We live together, we act on and react to one another, but always and in all circumstances we are by ourselves. The martyrs go hand in hand into the arena, and yet they are crucified alone. The lovers desperately try to fuse their insulated ecstasies into a single self-transcendence, but in vain. By its very nature, every embodied soul is doomed to suffer and enjoy in absolute solitude. Sensations, feelings, insights, fancies, all of these are private, and except through symbols and at second hand, incommunicable. We can pool information about experiences, but never the experience themselves. From family to nation, every human group is a society of island universes. Take the piano teacher, for example. He always says, relax, relax. But how can you relax while your fingers are rushing over the keys? Yet they have to relax. The singing teacher and the golf pro say exactly the same thing. And in the realm of spiritual exercises, we find that the person who teaches mental prayer does as well. We have somehow to combine relaxation with intense activity. The personal conscious self, being a kind of small island in the midst of an enormous arena of consciousness, which has to be relaxed, is the personal self, the self that tries too hard, that thinks it knows what is what and uses language. This has to be relaxed in order that the multiple powers at work within the deeper and wider self may come through and function as they should. In all psychophysical skills, we have this curious fact of the law of reversed effort. The harder we try, the worse we do that thing. To be shaken out of the ruts of ordinary perception, to be shown for a few timeless hours the outer and inner world, not as they appear to an animal obsessed with survival, or to a human being obsessed with words and notions, but as they are, apprehended directly and unconditionally. Happiness is not achieved by the conscious pursuit of happiness. It is generally the byproduct of other activities. Consistency is contrary to nature, contrary to life. The only complete, consistent people are the dead. There is one corner of the universe you can be certain of improving, and that is your own self. Every man's memory is his private literature. Most men and women will grow up. Most men and women will grow up to love their servitude and will never dream of revolution. The secret of genius is to carry the spirit of the child into old age, which means never losing your enthusiasm. I like being myself and nasty. Experience is not what happens to a man. It is what a man does with what happens to him. Most human beings have an almost infinite capacity for taking things for granted. So, throw away your baggage and go forward. There are quicksands all about you, sucking at your feet, trying to suck you down into fear and self-pity and despair. That's why you also lately undertow and bug in soft and deeply encoded. I want to know what passion is. I want to feel something strongly. I wanted to change the world, but I have found that the only thing one can be sure of is she things known and things unknown, and in between are the doors of perception. That men do not learn very much from the lessons of history is the most important of all the lessons that history has to teach. Facts do not cease to exist because they are ignored. After silence, that which comes nearest to expressing the inexpressible is music. I don't want comfort. I want God. I want poetry. I want real danger. I want freedom. I want goodness. I want sin. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you mad. If one is different, one is bound to be lonely. The more powerful and original a mind, the more it will incline towards the religion of solitude. Words can be like X-rays if we use them properly. They'll